Hello and welcome to another episode of Merrill Talks, where we take a deep dive into the world of finance, investments, and the global economy. I'm your host, Yannick Pace, and today we're going to be covering Nvidia's blowout earnings and the semiconductor industry in general. As always, I'm joined by Merrill Fund Portfolio Manager Marc El-lazidi. Before we get started, a quick reminder, as always, that this discussion is intended for information purposes only and should not be construed to be investment, financial, or any other form of professional advice. So this week we're going to be discussing the ins and outs of the semiconductor sector and how Mark views this landscape going forward. I guess the only place we can start is with Nvidia's stellar run last week after it outperformed all estimates with its Q1 earnings and especially its Q2 guidance. So the stock is up, I guess, roughly 160% since the start of the year. How high can it go, Mark?
Good morning, Yannick. Yes, magnificent guidance, I will say. It seems the sky is the limit. The machines are taking control of our daily life with generative AI. It is a concept which is closer than what we thought, probably based on Nvidia guidance. Let's start with this segment, which brings a lot of hype, which is data center. Data center is an incredible fast-growing segment due to the high demand for AI. The projections for next year's, Nvidia expect to double up its revenue for the data center. At the moment, the CPU is the dominant technology for data center. Graphic units represent just a small fractions. In this case, Nvidia said that GPU, which is graphic unit, represent only 4% of the market. So what they expect for the demand for GPU could represent in the coming years probably 100%. What I'm saying is probably we are going in a direction of an hybrid with CPU and GPU. So now I want to start also to discuss the cloud because I think it's quite an important segment here. Google Cloud is the first provider to offer the new processor of NVIDIA, which is the L4 Tensor Core GPU, which will accelerate generative AI, especially applications related to this kind of AI applications. This new processor, this new GPU, offer 2.5 better performance compared to the old generations. Plus, it offers an incredible energy efficiency. It is a great news, especially for the large public like us. Why I'm saying this? Because Google is quite absent to the corporate world. Now, on the other side, we have also NVIDIA having a partnership with Medtronic, which is active on the healthcare equipment. So it's quite large, the spectrum, I will say. And on one thing is also very interesting, have a partnership with ServiceNow, which is a company dedicated to serve corporate in the cloud. Now, we cannot finish without talking about the automotive because also NVIDIA have some partnerships with BYD, the Chinese electrical car. And in this car, it will put like the NVIDIA Drive Orin. Now, we have been discussing technology. Let's discuss a little bit what's going on the balance sheet and on the P&L side, because the company registers 19% of increase in revenue compared to the previous quarter. This is incredible. But the sky seems very, very high, but there is some cloud there. Why? Let me explain to you. Inventories are quite high, and it could have a direct impact on the balance sheet. Let me to provide an idea on how's the cost, especially at the inventory side. For example, the A100 has a cost of around 10,000 per unit. And the new technology with the processor H100, which is 12 times more faster than the A100, it costs around 40,000. So at the moment, the value of the inventory of NVIDIA is around 5.2 billion, double up from last year. So definitely the sky is not so clean as we can imagine. Now let's discuss a little bit about the guidance and the forecast of NVIDIA. They expect for Q2 roughly $11 billion. This is impressive. It represents the largest quarterly revenue generated by the company. And obviously, they're expecting this coming from one segment, the data centers. On that side, we can put in perspective like Intel and Nvidia the competitor in the GPU space, they didn't indicate so many growth on the previous quarter. So following the NVIDIA earnings, we can say that confidence that the demand for GPU is very high, and it's probably what the things is driving the hype at the moment. Let's have a look on the chart of NVIDIA. Quite impressive, I would say. And this is on a year-to-date basis. So really, I will say this is really stellar, and it seems the sky is the limit.
In fact, I think, in fact, on the earnings call, NVIDIA President Jensen Huang basically said that there was the value of these data center chips was about $1 trillion, and they need to be replaced once every 4 years. So as it seems, it looks like it's all going to go to Nvidia. But do you see AMD or perhaps even Intel managing to claw back some market share in the space in the short term, or do you think this is the year Nvidia has consolidated its market position?
Yes, I mean it's really a good point, Yannick. Definitely, I mean Nvidia is the first mover advantage. But we shouldn't dismiss AMD or Intel. I mean, definitely Intel, as we know and we discussed on our previous webinar, it seems like lost in transitions. I mean, for them, moving from CPU to GPU, that's a difficult challenge, and are in the middle of a restructuring process. I mean, the company on this quarter, I mean, show like very, very bad result, 36% in the drop in revenue. And I think the cause, it's quite clear, it's the low demand for PC. Because like I say, and what they say, I mean, it's dropped to the lowest level numbers on the past 10 years during this Q1 2023. Now, I don't want to spend so much time on Intel. I think the real competitor of NVIDIA, it's clearly AMD. Why? Because it's a fantastic company. And I think this time on the earnings side, AMD exceed most analyst estimate for this quarter. The AMD stocks fell 6% after the earnings, but recover almost immediately. I mean, now, since the chip maker also registered 11% of increase after the result of NVIDIA. Definitely, AMD is the competitor here of NVIDIA. In the same time, Intel fell 7%. Maybe let's have a look of the chart of NVIDIA and AMD. Definitely on the trend. And now I wanted to discuss a little bit also about what type of technology they get at AMD side. They offer a new line of AI chips, which is the MI300, a direct competitor of the H100 of NVIDIA. To give you the things in terms of price, AMD offer quite a competitive things with 28,000, sorry. And the H100 from NVIDIA, it's around 40,000. So I think there is quite a difference of price. Now, the M300 was released in January this year. AMD claimed that it's the first processor to offer a first data center chip. What does it mean? It's combined CPU, GPU, and memory into a single integrated design. So I think, honestly, here, they are quite good in this kind of competitions, side by side. Here you can see, like in this case, Intel lagging big time, losing its transitions.
So I guess it looks like Nvidia has maybe won the battle, but not the war, in the sense that AMD is there. It is the one which is most likely to kind of maybe challenge Nvidia, but so far it looks like pretty much Nvidia.
Correct.
On the other hand, of the performance spectrum this year, we have Qualcomm, which, unlike Nvidia, has been having a pretty rough time of late. What's behind this poor performance?
Yes, I mean, Qualcomm is a reputable company, but its main weakness is its high dependency of small number of clients, and mainly in the mobile communication sector. So as you can see, maybe we will see the chart here. It's quite lagging even against the rest of the semiconductors, big time. I mean, the problem of the underperformance of Qualcomm, it's its positioning. I think it's a little bit lagging, like Intel. When I'm saying little bit, I mean it's really lagging, I will say. I think the smartphone shipments decline in Q1 2023, and following a weak holiday season quarter, I think there is a low demand for Qualcomm product. we expect maybe a resurgence in a smartphone purchase, maybe. But the inflation is still high, and people are tending to say, okay, at the moment, I'm not changing my mobile. So clearly, Qualcomm is lagging. Now, as we can see now on the chart here, we will bring Broadcom. And as we know, Broadcom had normally should sign a deal with Apple. So definitely here on the 5G space, there is a lot of competitions, and Qualcomm, it seems, lagging the rest of the industry. If you see, for example, in this case, we see the stocks, which is the index, the reference index.
Okay, so looking further ahead, over the past year or so, we've seen a number of countries make moves to bring more of the semiconductor design and manufacturing supply onshore. The US CHIPS Act has made about $280 billion available. The EU CHIPS Act will also make, I think, something like $43 billion available. We have similar initiatives in South Korea, Japan. What's your take on all of this? How is it going to shape the market going forward?
Yes, I mean, definitely there is a lot of money at the moment, and especially governments are pushing in these directions. I mean, there is no doubt that semiconductors are part of our daily life. I mean, and we have to go in this direction, and they are becoming even crucial for the economic growth. I mean, we noticed like during, for example, COVID-19, during the pandemic, we have been quite vulnerable with the semiconductor shortage. And we know, like, for example, in the automobile industry, it was an issue, etc., etc. At the moment, there is like rising geopolitical tensions between China and US. It's something not new, but it's also have a direct impact on the semiconductor supplies. I mean, these two nations are competing for AI, and they're also competing for global economic supremacy. So it's mean like US sometimes is encouraged to restrict China access to advanced chip, and this is what they did actually. So this is where we stand at the moment.
And what impact do you think it is likely to have on the sector? Now, are we going to have to see a realignment of the supply chains? How do you see it developing?
I mean, definitely there is a realignment. I think it's quite interesting. For example, as you know, there is in Arizona, Intel and TSMC, they are building up massive manufacturing there. And actually, they are fighting to get the funding from the US government. So what Intel said, they want to match TSMC capability by 2024. So definitely TSMC in Arizona, Intel side by side, but they're asking for money from the US government. Now, we shouldn't neglect two major countries here in this space, which are located in Asia. We're talking about South Korea and Japan. So definitely South Korea, well, as we know, LG, Samsung, they are quite on the premium side on the semiconductors. And of course, the government in South Korea will support their champions. The Japanese government also will also support its national champion, and they have a clear aim for 2027 to go to 2 nanometers. You know, it's a big challenge, so there will be challenge TSMC in this case. So clearly here, where we say it's an interesting thing. Now in Europe, we know also it's a quite big monarchs coming, but as we say in the past, the problem in the union, it's always to find not only a national champion, but a super champion. So in this case, we can imagine, for example, a European manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, which is ASML, could do benefit on this, but also the US one, like Applied Materials and Lam, could be also the beneficiary of this kind of chip act.
Yeah, because I guess no matter who wins the competition, like the equipment is going to be bought anyway. So these companies obviously stand to gain quite a bit. That's a good point. I guess another factor is the potential of government sanctions and kind of more of this tit for tat between China and the US. What do you think about that? Do you think it's a concern, or from an investing perspective, or would you not worry too much about this?
Yes, I mean, definitely. I mean, let's have a look of the TSMC chart. It has been undervalued and under pressure. And clearly, TSMC was quite sideways for a certain time, maybe like massive under pressure of the geopolitical problems between China and US. And the good things, it's like China and Biden administrations to find an agreement. I mean, recently at the G7, it seems like Biden administration's going in a direction of China. So we can see in this chart of TSMC, pushing up also TSMC, who have been in the range. Now, on the other side, what we see, and we spoke about the G7, who took place not long time ago in Japan. I mean, obviously, China, after that, the response of China was to ban micron technology, and especially to participate on a key infrastructure project, stating it's a serious network securities. So they think definitely, I mean, one thing, Biden administration says something, on the other side, China is like also cutting the thing. So, I mean, there is a lot of distortion at the moment in the market, and it could bring also opportunities for the other competitors. So clearly, we are not like in a peaceful world, I will say, especially on the semiconductor superiority. And I think it's like we are more wait and see, and who will emerge in this case, or how China and US and how's the negotiations together, and we will find a compromise. Like we hope also that the debt ceiling will be finished soon.
I guess the question becomes like, obviously you hope for a resolution for the US to come closer to China and not have these tensions. But I guess the question, if that doesn't happen, becomes to what extent can US semiconductor companies continue to grow without access to the Chinese market? And I guess on the flip side, how much does China need these advanced chips from the West? I guess that's the game,
Yes,
the balance of affairs.
that's the balance, and that's why, like we say about Japan, having a clear aim to be in competition with TSMC with 2 nanometers. So clearly, I think each government, from Japan to Europe, we try to find a supremacy here, and we try to inject money in the research and development like China is doing. So to be not so dependent of US and also from TSMC. I mean, for example, a country who's quite advanced in this, it's Samsung. And they are clearly have an advantage. They have their own ecosystem. For example, if you go to Korea, you don't need to use Google Map. They have their own application. So they have been developing their own ecosystem, South Korea. So clearly here, I will say there is like some countries who could emerge, which is already the case. For example, Samsung is a competitor direct of Apple. So clearly going into the coming, I will say, months, some could emerge, and I think South Korea could be. Japan is also quite well positioned. We have a lot of interesting semiconductors there, and definitely Japanese government will really push in these directions.
I guess, for example, you mentioned South Korea. A couple of South Korean companies could stand to gain, presumably, from Micron being banned in China. So you also have that element there about whether South Korea will move in to take that market share, or whether it's going to align itself and work with the US in this regard. There's a lot of layers, I guess, to it all.
Definitely. I mean, the good things with South Korea, they have their own already ecosystem. And like we say in our previous webinar, there is no Google of this world in Europe. So that's an issue. When in South Korea, they have already the competitor in a Google map, where I'm saying if you go to here in Europe where we are based, I mean, there is, I mean, no other options. Then, of course, there is other options, but Google Map is the dominant player. So clearly here, or for example, talking about Amazon in US, but here, for example, South Korea has also his own Amazon with even a better logistic. So I think really South Korea, it's a promising country. But again, geopolitical tensions between the South and the North in Korea, it's still the same. As we know, they never signed a treaty of peace treaty. So they're technically still at war. So again, that's why it's pushing maybe for them to be resilient, and that's a key thing, especially when we talk about semiconductors.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's true of every industry, but the semiconductor one especially seems like it would obviously benefit from cooperation rather than this constant sanctions and competitions between countries. But anyway, we'll see how it develops, and one hopes that we'll have conditions that will allow for growth rather than contraction. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you very much for following, and goodbye.